Today's episode of NYC Mindset Podcast, we have Matthew Linsky. Matthew's a rising junior at Harvard University, and he competes at the national and the international level for fencing, right? Matthew grew up in the inner city, grew up here in New York City, and today he's really gonna just share his journey, share how fencing has changed his perspective on academics and personal development. So thank you, Matt, for being on today. And Matt, I just wanted for you to kind of start off, kind of like with your early life and background. Tell me a little bit about your family background growing up here in New York City.
Sure. I just want to thank you again for having me on here. It's a pleasure. So for my background, I was born in Brooklyn actually, but I moved to Manhattan when I was quite young, around 6 years old. And I grew up with a single mom my whole life, and she's great. Like, she supported me with everything. I attribute a lot of my success to her. But ever since I was in Manhattan, had a pretty standard upbringing, went to public school for my whole life. No complaints, honestly. Like, I think, grow up in the city is a very unique experience, but I think it gave me what I needed to go into college and to be an adult and just a successful person overall, hopefully.
Absolutely. And I know, Matt, that like for me personally, I'm a first generation college student, and obviously I take a lot of pride in that. Are you a first generation college student as well?
Yeah, first gen. My mom immigrated from the Soviet Union at the time,
Wow,
and so I'm the first one in my family.
that's amazing. I'm sure they're super proud of all the success that you had, especially landing at probably arguably one of the most prestigious universities in the United States, which is Harvard, right? So that's awesome. I really wanted to touch on fencing a little bit, right? So obviously growing up in New York City, some of the more popular sports, basketball, football, baseball, and certain sports like hockey, tennis, golf, lacrosse, and fencing aren't as popular. And that could be for a different, a number of reasons, right? Some sports are a lot more expensive than others, right? Like if you was to take a sport like soccer, it's a sport that is not as expensive as hockey, for example. I mean, just on cleats alone, skates alone, right? You're talking about maybe $200-300, right? Registration, travel, these things really add up. So, you know, what exactly made you fall in love with fencing?
It's a good question. Everyone has their own journey to get into the sport. I don't. There are a few people that I think like saw it for the first time and they're like, "Yeah, that's exactly what I." There are people like that, but it wasn't like that for me. I honestly did not like it at first. I got into it through there was like a program there was club in New York was doing every Saturday. They would have different sports. They would have basketball, swimming, judo, and then fencing was one of them. And I honestly did not like it. Was like the one we needed the most discipline and structure, and compared to the other cool sports, like boxing or basketball, it just it was not fun. Like, why would I want to dedicate myself and like learn this new footwork that I don't care about? But eventually one of the coaches walked up to my mom and was like, your kid should try fencing. He seems to have like a little more promise than the other kids are just running around the and I wasn't like super happy with it at first. Like, I think it was cool that I actually got one-on-one time with the coach, but what really I guess got me interested was actually competing, because I think that was like my first time like truly being competitive in a sport. I did swimming and soccer before, but it was never very serious. And I don't know. I think there's just something about that competitive mindset and being able to use new skills like in a sport that is so unique that really interested me, compared to like swimming or track where yeah, it's individual, but there's only so many new skills that you're developing. It's mainly just physical training, whereas in fencing I was learning like new types of ways to score, new rules every time I was going to practice, and I could apply those at tournaments. And so I guess the combination of competitiveness plus like the tactical aspect was what got me interested.
Nice. That's pretty cool, man. And obviously, the academics plays a major role, right, in being a student athlete. And I'm sure that your mom was, very tough on you to make sure that you kept those grades up. But when it comes to getting interest from an Ivy League school, right? you had to have had a different type of discipline in high school. So can you kind of talk a little bit about that process
Sure. Do you mean academically?
academically? Yeah.
Sure. Well, yeah, I think you're pretty right on that. My mom was always and pretty influential in my grades. And I'm very grateful she did that because now that I'm alone at college, I find it hard to have motivation sometimes to work. So very grateful for that. But I think this part I'm very lucky because when I went to a pretty competitive high school. It's called High School for Math, Science, and Engineering. It's one of the
Yes.
specialized ones.
Gotcha.
And so why I think I'm lucky is because I had such a competitive group of people around me that were all so smart. And I think it truly did, besides my family influence, I think it did push me past my limits to excel in school. Obviously, I was going through COVID during sophomore and junior year, so that took some, weight off my shoulders. Classes were online, etc. But I still knew, like freshman year, I cared about class, I cared about my grades, and I tried my best. But then when I actually thought about recruiting sophomore junior year, I knew it wasn't just something I could put 80% in. Like I really had to apply myself to the best of my ability in each of my classes to maximize my chances of getting recruited and getting to the best school that I possibly could.
Gotcha.
So
So,
yeah,
so being in a competitive environment definitely helped you,
for
academically, and I'm sure that even played a major role when it came to SAT prep, right? I'm sure that it was like a goal that you had, in terms of like scoring range, where you told yourself like if I could get between these scores, I could definitely go to like any university I want, nationwide. So how was the SAT process for you?
sure. Good question. I again got a little lucky here because I was studying for the SAT during COVID. That summer, I literally had nothing to do except fence, and even fencing was limited because the club was closed for certain days. We could only practice so much, so essentially practice, be on my computer, my PS5 or PS4, whatever, all day, and like study for the SAT. So obviously, I got to maximize my SAT prep, and most of it I did, yeah, for the most part, I did it alone. Like sometimes I would talk with my friends about their strategies because obviously with these super competitive kids at my school, and some of them were my friends, which I'm very grateful for. Uh, they would tell me their scores, and if they were higher than mine, I'd want to like catch up to them, which is like that can be an unhealthy mindset. But I think for me, it didn't really take too much of a toll on my mental health or anything. So it was good for me. So I basically got to just use that whole summer to practice, and I got the score. I got a score that I was happy with. So honestly, not too like, I don't want to say difficult, but it wasn't as stressful as I hear other people.
Gotcha, gotcha. And would you say that this dedication, to your academic performance came naturally, or would you say that your mom just had really high expectations for you and you knew what you had to do to
I
to
think
make her proud?
Yeah, good question. I think naturally, like I said earlier, I've always been pretty competitive, and I just want to get the best grades that I can. Even not the best, like not competitive as in I want to have the best grade. Like I want to have better grades than everyone else, but I just want to put my best foot forward and know that I put everything into this class, etc. But I do think that sometimes when I would take harder class or a class that I found super uninteresting, and I would tell my mom about it. I think she knew that I would want to relax, like slack off in those classes because, I knew it's not something I wanted to study in the future. I knew I didn't really care. So she would definitely be super helpful with motivating me in specifically those classes where I had like bad teachers or, I don't know, assignments that didn't make any sense to me. So I definitely thank her a lot for that.
Gotcha. And I think like family support is very important too, Matt. Like, you know, I wanted to touch on, the reality like that a lot of parents aren't as supportive as they should be when it comes to youth sports. So like, was your mom like 100% on board with you chasing this passion of fencing? I know that obviously fencing had opened up so many doors, and maybe at the time when you started fencing, I believe at 10 years old, your mom didn't know that it could help you land at an Ivy League, university, right? So was she completely on board from the jump?
Do you mean What do you mean for the jump?
Like, was she completely on board for you to, to start training,
Uh,
and compete, when it comes to fencing?
Great question. Let me gotta think back to when I was around 10. I think so. She was really supportive of me starting, and she actually pushed me to keep going when I wanted to quit in that first year or so. But when you start going to a lot of regional tournaments and the national tournaments, the price, it racks up. The equipment isn't cheap, training isn't cheap, and so I think her mindset was just if she can see that I'm putting effort and I'm being successful, then the investment is worth it at the end of the day. And
That's awesome.
so I think in my eyes and hopefully in her eyes, she saw that I was succeeding enough for her to continue supporting me.
That's awesome, man. And obviously you mentioned training and how expensive training could be, right?
Yeah.
In this sport, what does the training look like to better prepare yourself for competing?
Yeah. So usually in middle high school, like at any time before college, you usually join a private club in your area and you have your own personal coach. And so you would take one-on-ones with your personal coach, and then you'd also do group classes with the kids at your club. Depending on the size of your club, obviously this differs for everyone. I was lucky enough to go to one of the best clubs in the country, Manhattan Fencing Center. So they're known for the elite athletes they put out. They have multiple Olympians, multiple world champions, multiple NCAA champions. So the fact that they're just in New York and not too far from me was amazing. I think like honestly, New York, California, maybe Atlanta is are the best clubs, and there's like a lot of talk about if you live in a certain area you're at a disadvantage, which I agree with. But anyway, that's discussion for another time. So yeah, anyway, you have your coach and the class that you do. So usually I would do like three group classes a week. They're each like 2.5 hours, 3 hours, and then the private lessons with the coach are like 30 minutes, and I'd have like three of those a week. And obviously, this differs if you're competing, but for the most part, I'd be in the club 5 days a week, 4 to 5 days a week. Yeah.
The high school that you attended, did they compete throughout the city in fencing, or this was just kind of like, you obviously trained and everything, outside of high school, right?
Yeah, it was completely outside of school. Most New York schools don't have fencing, and if they do, it's very non-competitive. I know states like New Jersey take it very seriously, but I think it was honestly good that they didn't have it, so I could completely focus my time on my own
On your academics,
personal career.
gotcha. And how would you say, Matt, that fencing shaped your character, discipline, overall personal development?
Yeah, I th- good question. It definitely made me a more disciplined person in general, as I think team sports were just never it for me. Not that I had trouble collaborating, but I think I needed to have that experience of developing as my own athlete. Um, it definitely helped me balance like individual versus team aesthetic because when you're in your private club, the only way to practice with other people is just to fence them. And even though you're teammates in the club, if you guys meet each other in a competition, you're still on your own. You're still fencing for your own placement. So I think being able to differentiate the team aspect when I'm like friends with my teammates and practicing within the club versus when I'm in the competition, I'm completely on my own. I'm in the zone. And yeah, I think now that I'm fencing in college, which is completely different, it's more of a team aspect, I'm able to balance those very well. And I think
Gotcha.
that's what is super unique about fencing compared to other sports.
Nice. And what would you say like has been the most important lessons that you've learned throughout your experience in fencing at Harvard?
At Harvard, I would say communication. This is pretty generic answer, but I think always communication with your coaches and your teammates is key. If you're, especially for fencing, a lot of people develop a very tight relationship with their hometown coach, and then when you go to like a college in a different area of a different coach, they have to basically start from scratch with you because they have no idea. They may have no idea how like you like to train or your habits. So being able to communicate those early on and developing your training around that is key. And also just in general, like I think it's great for developing a relationship with your teammates and coaches, being able to speak with them and just make like, it develops the morale of where you're training.
Nice. And Matt, obviously, you competed and represented the U.S. at the national and worldwide level, right? Like, when did you start to get national attention? And you began to realize, like, wow, like, I think I'm pretty talented at this.
Yeah, I think I was kind of a late bloomer for this, honestly. So nationally, there's like under 12, under 14, under 16 age group, and usually a lot of kids who are good growing up, they medal like when they're 10, when they're 12, when they're 14, like every age group essentially. And I didn't get my first national medal until I think I was 16, and that was like during the COVID tournament. So those were they were still strong, but a lot of people didn't go to the first tournaments post COVID just because I don't know. I don't think they gave as many points or they weren't as strong for whatever reason. So yeah, I started. That was my first medal, and then I got another medal at. I got medals in back-to-back tournaments, and then I think I got medals in like four tournaments in a row on the national level in like the under 16 age category, and then eventually that was good enough to put me high enough in the rankings to where I compete internationally. And so the way it works in fencing is there's a world team for every age category. So for under 16, the top three in the country go to world championships. For under 19, it's like top four. So you're competing internationally, nationally to get the most points to get into this world team. So when I medaled in these national tournaments, I think I was like first or second. And so at that point, I knew the season was like, it's definitely possible to make this world team. And then, I go internationally. I don't even think it's. There was a point where I was like realizing that I got national attention. I think it just became normal because so many of the kids around me were also very good and doing as well, if not better than probably better than me, honestly, for the most part. I ended up getting fourth that season, not making the world team, but I think that was definitely my breakout season. So I guess junior year of high school is when I started, and then senior year was like my peaks or
Nice.
my first like good season.
Gotcha. And like, what did that mean for you personally to kind of like represent the United States at the world stage?
Yeah, it felt I don't know. It felt pretty surreal at first. Like the first international competition you go to. I think the first international I went to was actually before COVID, but I was a lot younger, so I was still competing with all these older kids around me. But it was crazy. Like getting your first USA warm up and really that you're representing your country is definitely a surreal feeling. I can't even imagine what the people at the Olympics right now are feeling. That must be a whole nother level. But it's definitely like something you take for granted, unfortunately, after a few times because after your third or fourth tournament, it's like, okay, I already know who's here, I know the competition here, I know what I'm here to do. But at the end of the day, like when you look back at it, you represented your country for years, um, which is something very few people can say they did for their sport. So
Gotcha.
yeah, I guess that's good. I got to reflect back on that right now. Yeah.
That's pretty neat, man. And Harvard, they were the 2024 NCAA national champions, right? So like, describe, congratulations first of all, and describe that feeling of being a national champion at the NCAA Division One level.
Yeah, this season was pretty crazy because on paper we were definitely not expected to win. The preseason polls, which honestly don't matter that much, but the preseason polls had us at like seventh or eighth, and then on it, we also had a lot of injuries. A lot of things did not go our way this season, so I guess a lot of people went into the mindset of like, okay, this is just a buffer season. Next year we're getting a lot of good recruits, so it's fine, whatever. We'll just do our thing this year. But after regionals, so regionals is like the tournament that determines the qualification for nationals for NCAA's. At regionals, we did very well. We qualified the maximum amount of people, and I think at that point we realized, wow, we could actually win this thing against Notre Dame, who's historically probably the best fencing school in the country. So that 1 month was pretty surreal. We were training super hard and came out with a victory, which was amazing. Second victory ever for Harvard fencing, or for the program. Definitely amazing experience. I got to go to the White House actually this week for there's like an NCAA champion celebration, so we were invited to that. An awesome experience, and yeah, I mean, I was ecstatic. It was amazing. Our team got so much closer. Like I think the whole thing about going into any season or game of having low expectations and surpassing them is got to be like one of the best feelings in sports. So, uh, great season. Yeah, hopefully we can recreate it next year. We're getting some amazing kids. We're getting two Olympians who are competing next week, actually. And yeah, hopefully we can do it again.
So I wish y'all all the best of luck. And, obviously, like, this has been a pretty long journey for you personally, Matthew. You're going to your junior year of college. Like, who would you say has been like your biggest supporter, or biggest supporters and mentors in general throughout like this whole process?
Yeah, biggest supporter was definitely mom. She was with me at 95% of tournaments, and the other five were just because she couldn't go because of work, probably. Biggest mentors, probably definitely my coaches from back home, like my hometown coach, Sergey. He's extremely accomplished. Like, all of his students are very successful, and he made me the fencer I am, essentially. So I would not be anywhere without him. And Yuri Gelman, who's the main guy at my fencing club, he's also extremely decorated. So I think those two are definitely my biggest mentors in fencing. Uh, Also, some of my teammates from Harvard who are actually going to be competing tomorrow. Their names Mitchell, Philip, and Eli. I trained with them last year at Harvard. Now they're all graduated and they're doing super well, as you can see. So they let my freshman year at Harvard be amazing, both inside of practice and outside.
That's great. That's great. And Matt, obviously, like, you know, Harvard has a reputation for being very competitive, academically. What are you studying right now, and how has the past few years been for you academically?
Sure. I'm studying economics with a secondary in psychology. Um, it hasn't been, I mean, it's been tough, obviously. It's Harvard. There's going to be hard courses, but I think once you get into the groove of things, obviously freshman year is a bit tough, but after that, you get into the groove of things, you get your study habits, you learn how to, take proper classes, like you learn how to like make your schedule essentially. And I think with the right group of people around you, which I believe I have an amazing group of people around me, experience has been great academically and socially as well. So
That's great. That's great. And obviously, Matt's junior year is pretty big, right? And I actually met you on the train, right? You were coming home from your internship, and I saw the Harvard fence, and we kind of just sparked up a conversation. Like, what are your future goals, both academically and in your professional career?
good question. Academically, same as growing up, just do the best I can given my circumstances, which I feel like I've been doing. But yeah, junior year supposedly supposed to be the toughest one. So we'll see how that goes. Hopefully I can make it out alive. And academic or professionally. So I'm planning to go into finance with my degree. So that's the plan out of college. But I have been thinking about business school, which I should apply for senior year. And yeah, I guess I'm still quite young. I'd like to think I'm 19, so I have a lot of time to think about it. But it's good to have thoughts out there for what I want to do. So yeah, finance and maybe business school. My answer.
Love that answer. Love that answer. And Matt, to kind of end this interview, what advice would you give to other young athletes from the inner city, from inner city communities who aspire to play collegiate sports?
A lot of pressure here. Find something, and then this is not just within sports, it's within anything, but find one thing that motivates you and just keep working for that. And if you accomplish that thing that was motivating you, find a new thing to motivate you. Because without something to work toward, at least in my experience, it's extremely hard to find enjoyment or pleasure in doing something like sports or academics. And I, I think with myself and people that I've talked to, that's what a lot of our success has been attributed to: goals and yeah, any sort of motivation.
That's great, man. Man, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining the Inner City Mindset
Yeah,
podcast
thank you.
today. And you're a sharp kid. Your mom should be very proud. You have a very bright future ahead. And, I wish you the best of luck this upcoming season, all right?
Thank you, man. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time, brother.